OneSoccer Friday Fun Day. Ask me anything. No rules spectacular. I'm Adam Jenkins, joined by the fellas to round out your week. Gareth Wheeler, a little play-by-play duo action and some Welsh content on OneSoccer. Excited about that. And Oliver Platt and Kurt Larson. I got Kurt shaking his head before I'm even done the intro, so you know that I'm doing my job well. There are no
you
rules
guys,
today.
you're Welsh connections. That's what it is. It's always Wales.
It's never Wales, which is why we're so proud of it,
Okay.
actually.
All right.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to try and get to as many questions as possible. We've asked you for the lead up even last night to send your questions in. We'll check on the YouTube chat sporadically. Producer Kyle, I know, is always active in the chat, but he's also good at feeding the best ones over so we can get everyone's take on them. And we're going to talk about some big picture discussions. Ollie, I won't ask you how you're doing today or how your weekend is going, just so you know.
I had a really good answer ready as well.
I like up and down.
We don't like hear it today, Ollie.
I like up and down, Ollie. I like up and down, Ollie. He was so positive about 2 weeks ago. I remember he was saying he was feeling on top of the world, and now it's just been a drastic decline day by day.
Yeah. Hang in there, pal. Hang in there.
I think I'm back on the upwards.
Don't get tricked. Don't get fooled again, man.
Don't let false optimism into your life, Ollie. That's the lesson we want you to take away today. Okay, so we'll start with the most serious or biggest issue that made news this week, and then we'll have a little bit more fun as the show progresses. Let's talk about the union that was formed. We've had a couple more days to think about it to generate some opinions. Obviously, people on social media, Reddit and Twitter in particular, very active, and everyone has an opinion on it. But we haven't heard from Gareth yet. So I'll give you the first word on this one, Gareth, and just in terms of your overall reactions and some big picture takeaways from the formation of the Professional Football Association Canada.
Yeah, it's not surprising that any group of players in any league around the world want a bigger voice or have their issues heard, whether it's pertaining to finances, the way that the leagues run, their rights as individual employees of the league as well. I totally appreciate all that. Everything seems to be moving a little bit quick. And right now we're going through a completely unprecedented time where the shape of not just this league, but all leagues can be altered one way or the other moving forward. And for any players union or any union of any kind to actually bring their argument forward in a concise, projected way, I think that you should give it some time. The MLS, their players union wasn't formed until 2003. That was 7-8 years after the league was up and running, and there were still up and downs after that. And you can make the argument that they haven't been able to operate effectively until recent years. So I would like, if I was a player in the league right now, yes, I would pursue these types of endeavors, but you got to trust the league at this point. A lot has been put into just getting this thing off the ground, and everything's happened relatively quickly. I would just want a clear lay of the land. What is life after COVID-19 going to look like? What's life in the Canadian Premier League going to look like as the league grows, expands? And I think that if you wait and show a little bit more patience, then your argument will be based upon more solid grounds. Because right now, I'm not sure what exactly they're out there fighting for.
All right. Kurt, when we asked you on Wednesday, you've only had the chance to speak to a player and someone from the league just because it was a quick turnaround. So what kind of conversations have you been able to have since then?
Similar conversations, and I'm pretty satisfied with what both parties are saying. I think just Gareth, put it pretty well there. I think the one thing I would add right now is a story. I think it just broke today. I think through ESPN that Major League Soccer is currently in talks with its players union about salary reductions of as much as 50% this year, depending on the number of games that are eventually played. Part of that report also stated that players making under a certain threshold would not have their salaries impacted. So I think the comparison here is that I think the CPL players would just like that scenario more than the scenario they currently have, right? Just those discussions on what's happening to their bottom line. So that's where I'd put me at today. People have heard my opinion. I understand both sides. I think people need to realize that the ownership in this league has invested millions and millions so far, and this is a long-term play. So over to Ollie if he's got anything to add to that.
No, I could only really echo what the other guys have said. I agree. I think they need to, exercise some caution in terms of how they're approaching things, and that applies to both sides as well. I think in Canadian soccer we've got a lot of different elements and groups, and we've seen over the past few years some actual, real collaboration in terms of forming the CSB and forming the CPL. And I kind of see the players' union as another group coming into that. So if, you know, both sides act in kind of a fair and equitable manner, then hopefully it's a good thing in the long run. But certainly in a time like this, you would just hope that both sides kind of exercise a little bit of caution and respect for the other's position.
No arguments that this union wouldn't have been formed this quickly without the pandemic and wage reductions as a result?
Yeah, I think people always use, you know, a bit of a crisis and to their advantage when they can. And I think you'd be a bit naive to think that, you know, part of this website and part of the idea to announce the formation of this union or the proposed union was, you know, a result of this crisis and having a voice in how it unfolds.
Yeah, these two sides, I mean, there's going to be a partnership here between players and owners. And look, year one, I think like a lot was learned about everything from the scheduling of the league, the challenges that present that you don't know until you get into it. So I think year one, like, and we're just a year in now, it was all about figuring out what works, what didn't work, and where we can go from here. And I think that right now is just, I think we're still very much in that area, the 8th team coming into the league in Ottawa, like, and all kinds of room for growth. I just think that if a little bit of patience is exercised, it's probably a better conversation to have 2 years down the road.
I would want to give just a small shout out to the league though, and speaking with a few people over there. I mean, let's be reminded that the league hasn't kicked off its second season yet, and the league is committed to paying these players regardless, right? So they've deferred the salaries. They're still paying the players right now, despite having not even kicked a ball this year.
Mm. All right, get to our first fan question of the episode. This one comes from Adam to start it out. In terms of signings for the year, who had the better winter, FC Edmonton or Pacific FC? Ollie, you didn't get a last voice there, so I'll give you first take.
This is a close one, but I will give the edge to Pacific.
Not close.
Sure, it's close. Anyway, but I think Pacific landed more big fish when you look at Marco Bustos being, you know, probably most sought after CPL free agent. You look at Irving, Meyer, Giguere, Dixon, 3 players that I think a lot of teams would have wanted from the Ottawa Fury. So to get all of those players was big for Pacific. I also just think that Pacific started further behind Edmonton and they had more to do. And I would say that they've done it and they're kind of in a fairly tight race with Edmonton, the way I look at it going into the season. So they've probably made up a bit more ground from their starting point than Edmonton have. And so I'd give them the edge.
Or why wasn't it close?
Well, we're talking about Boakai and Zetterberg, who a lot of people around the league like. I mean, who else are we really? I might be forgetting somebody, but who else are we really talking about with Edmonton? And I think
Kevin Alman.
Alman, yeah, Didic coming back.
Yeah, but okay. Well, we don't know what Alman's going to be, though, right? I mean, this is a player people have been talking about for a long time. He's been up and down. Was supposed to be the future of Canadian soccer. Where's he been? But you look at Pacific and what they've done. They've added some experience. I think proven commodities. Oliver, I'll give you credit because you did mention the guy that I was going to mention in Callum Irving in goal. I did think they needed to upgrade in goal. I think he's going to be a big help there. So I'm going with Pacific, obviously.
Yeah, I'm going with Pacific as well. And what was the knock on Pacific last year? They were so young. They didn't have experienced players to bring them through games, and players like Dixon and Meyer Giguere, players that have played at the USL level. And Dixon's been around for a long time. It's not just the star player in Bustos or a new starting goalkeeper. It's bringing that experience into the team and an X factor and a player that comes over from Club America and Diaz. I think they've had a phenomenal offseason, if not the best offseason in all of the Canadian Premier League.
They say we don't talk about them enough, so they can't say that anymore.
What I will add
to
that is that I didn't think Pacific were very good last year. And I know compared to Cavalry and Forge, no one was very good, but I do think that they were probably quite significantly worse than Edmonton were last year, even if the standings don't show that. I think Edmonton,
you think so? You really think so?
I do. I think when you look at some of the underlying stats, I don't think they were a good team last year, and I think they had a lot to do to catch up. So they needed this offseason more than Edmonton did, in my opinion.
But they had more than double the underage minutes played than any other team in the Canadian Premier League. They were so young. And what I do give them credit, because they had all kinds of injuries across the back line. They experimented. They tried different things. They played a progressive brand of football. They were trying to play the game the quote unquote right way. I was actually quite impressed at times when I saw Pacific play, and I just didn't think they had the horses to get them there.
They had good days for sure. I just think they had a lot of bad ones. And okay, you can assign them some credit for playing young players and trying to play a certain brand of football, but it didn't lead, in my opinion, to results.
Jeff Paulus is in your head.
Edmonton, I think Edmonton are a decent side, and I also think that they kind of mailed it in towards the end of last
Paulus
season.
got very experimental, and I think
they got very experimental. Maybe mailed it in is the wrong word, but I think they were looking ahead to this year and did not really put a whole lot of, kind of win now mentality into their back half.
Saw you put them at number 4 in your recent power rankings, and I thought you were having a laugh. So we'll see.
We should get to power rankings eventually. I don't think have we done power rankings on the Hangouts yet? I don't think we have.
I get yelled at by people every time I do power rankings. How can you how can you do that? There's no players. You haven't kicked the ball yet. Ottawa only has 13 players. Yeah, so I stopped doing it.
These people need to understand. These people need to understand what media is about.
They got in your ear, Kurt. I can't believe you're so easily manipulated, Kurt.
Yeah, I got pushed around by the web again.
Got a new nickname for you.
You were tougher than that, Lars.
Kurt Play-Doh Larson. Form them and mold them however you please.
All right, we'll get to some more fan questions in a little bit, but let's move on now to a pretty big story, especially for our American neighbors from ESPN, where Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's done a lot, been one of the leading voices in the U.S. on just the COVID situation and potential ways to return to play. And that was the focus of this article with ESPN. And he mentioned that there is a way of doing that. Nobody coming to the stadiums, put them in big hotels, keep them surveilled. And even the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, is talking about baseball with the Mets, Jeff Wilpon. So there seems to be a growing movement towards let's get back to playing now. So what are some of the possible formats that would allow the CPL or sports in general let's start there. Sports in general to come back sooner than later, and Wheels will get you the first word.
Tournament style. This is not about bringing people into stadiums and putting lives unnecessarily at risk. This is about, and this is the prime time for television and streaming entities to really, this is their time to shine. This is their time to kind of take the fan experience to another level. People right now are itching, they're scratching, they want to see professional sports being played. And what better way to provide it? Everyone's stuck at home watching whatever they haven't watched on Netflix or Crave or whatever. If you can present highly competitive, entertaining sporting products to them, people will consume. And I think you have to do it in small bunches. I don't think that you're going to be able to crown a Canadian Premier League traditional champion. You're not going to, give away the Stanley Cup or the Larry O'Brien Trophy or anything like that. But you can put together some creative little tournaments where you keep teams isolated in some sort of safe area for a month-long period, and you play games. All that, like you're a kid playing soccer tournaments. Like the games come fast and furious. You make it short, you make it quick, and you hand out some kind of reward at the end of it, whether it's financial or otherwise. I think it just presents a great opportunity to go back to just doing tournament-style games. Forget about regular seasons. Just either knock out best of 3 tournament styles, and we'll see how that plays out. Because right now, I think it's about the entertainment value, getting the players back out there in their natural environments as well. So I think you can kind of take some chances and go about things in a different way.
Yeah, I'm a bit more hopeful than that. I'm a bit more hopeful than that. And considering what I think Major League Soccer and the CPL might consider, I'm thinking about cost reduction. I'm thinking about fewer flights. I'm thinking about regionalizing things, if you will, to a certain extent, while then still having an MLS Cup style or a CPL Championship style playoff at the end of it. I'm thinking, if we can start up in July, June, July, then I think we can have some kind of, season that is close to what you would have had. If we get to August and they have to start getting creative, then I'm looking, in the CPL, for instance, as an East-West scenario where only teams in the East play each other in some kind of round robin regular season. How long that is, I don't know. Could be home and away. So you could play a 6-game kind of little round robin, if you would, and then go into an 8-team knockout stage tournament. So that's what I would have is regionalize a regular season, if you will, shorten it, and then go into a really, really large knockout style tournament. So that's the best I could do right now.
Yeah, something like that I think is possible. I wonder what is being thought of in terms of the Canadian Championship as well, while we're on Canadian soccer. Obviously, with TFC and Montreal and Vancouver kind of waiting to see what happens with MLS, and then you have the CPL on the other hand. I'd be interested to see how that fits together and whether there's something they could do there to kind of have a unified Canadian tournament if the tournament route is the way we're going to go. But that would obviously depend on the 3 MLS clubs not being able to rejoin their actual competition. So, but I don't really have a ton of ideas to add beyond what Kurt said, because I think that would be the most likely route.
What happens? I mean, what happens to the CONCACAF Champions League, and then what happens to the qualification process? Right? Have you guys thought about that at all? And should they just basically kill this year's competition at the international level, and then just have Montreal be the entry into the next seasons? I mean, what happens? What happens if they can play another Canadian championship? Do they just have it? And
Montreal didn't get to play their Champions League run, right? So I think
they played a little bit of it. No,
they played one round.
Played 3 games. Yeah. And then the first leg.
So for me, if the Canadian Championship isn't going to happen, which could be, becoming more of a possibility, then you have to send Montreal back in. I don't think they got really a fair crack at this year's Champions League.
I'd agree. Wanted to broach this with you guys quickly. Yesterday, David Clanachan, Commissioner of the CPL, was on Writer's Block on SportsNet. And the biggest takeaway from that I found intriguing was that he mentioned they haven't even considered the scenario of no fans in the stands. When we spoke to him last Friday, we didn't get to that point of, I think it was just a lot of, we've been running hypotheticals, but for him to say specifically, we haven't even entertained no fans, does that seem realistic that hasn't been considered yet?
No, it doesn't. I'm sure, there's a lot of smart people at the league. I'm sure they've considered every single scenario and the pros and cons of it. I think if, you're talking about those things, I think you're trying to do everything possible to avoid that scenario, right? Because then you're talking about an entirely different animal. So, the way they're approaching that is most likely to keep that as a last resort and to probably not even really want to talk about it at this point would be my guess.
Right. Well, yeah, it's different, I think, for the CPL compared to like Major League Baseball, which is, okay, there is a stadium element, but it is in a big way, it's a TV property nowadays in terms of where the money is coming from for MLB. I think with smaller soccer leagues, there is still more of a reliance on game day revenue and paying for a game day by letting fans into the stadium, right? And so that has to be more of a consideration for me. That being said,
you saw the Seattle Sounders come out and say the same thing recently. Yeah. So there's similar in Major League Soccer, but go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, just that being said, I do think there's an opportunity here to maybe be a little bit creative and figure out how you can kind of grow your TV product in a way that makes that loss of match day income worthwhile.
And the thing is, it might not be his decision to make, unfortunately, because the city of Los Angeles has taken away sports until 2021 in the city, which means that if any of those other sports do end up restarting, they're going to have to play their games elsewhere. So it all depends on how things are happening in our border. But I think even compared to Major League Soccer, I mean, cross-border travel is the biggest question mark. And, you're reading more stories about, you're kind of flattening the curve here in this country. And that's promising for leagues like the Canadian Premier League and the Canadian Football League, where you can maybe kind of control the conditions a little bit more and avoid that cross-border travel.
It's a good point, Wheels. And even City of Toronto, which would affect York 9 directly based on where they play right now, Calgary as well, have put those time limits or time restrictions on. Yeah. So you're right. I saw that sort of circulating around social media, so I wanted to make sure that I got answers for those people from you guys. Let's go back to another fan question now. This one first for Ollie specifically, and Ollie's going to love this because we've asked him this several times. Is that a beer that you're drinking, Ollie? And that comes from Blake.
A Heineken?
It's not a Heineken.
Heineken or a steam whistle?
It's a popular lemon and lime sparkling drink.
How posh! How posh of you! It's Friday. It's Friday, and as far as I know, and this was the best thing that the city of Toronto did, is they got rid of that 11 a.m. first drink at bars and restaurants, because oftentimes you wake up and you go to the pub and you're having breakfast, you're watching either a Premier League or a Bundesliga game or whatever, and you want to have a pint while you're watching an early morning rugby match. So Ollie, crack one open. These things start at 1 p.m.
I've got one for after the show. I'm tired of the happy hour crew getting all the fun with drinks during the broadcast. Okay, next big question. This one's for everyone. And I will say, be quick, because we've talked about this in varying degrees. So I want like 30 seconds or less from you guys, because this could stretch on way too long. Simon wants to know, bluntly, does Canada have what it takes to qualify for the World Cup? Wheels, first word.
In what year?
That's a good question.
2022?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I said this at an event leading up to the win against the United States on October 15th at home, and people were kind of portraying the U.S. to be these massive favorites heading into the match, and I just didn't see it that way. You look at the U.S. squad, there's probably a little bit more depth, but in terms of man-for-man talent, I just don't see them being better right now, or markedly better than the Canadian team. This is actually a great time for Canada to kind of take that next step, because some of these other teams within CONCACAF are taking steps back, or they're rebuilding. Costa Rica got very old very quick. Same thing with Honduras. I absolutely think, and I fully expect, just based upon what we're going through right now, that this format will change and Canada will not be in the 7 to 35 group. I think that we're looking at a potential shuffling of the deck of the way that teams are going to be qualifying through CONCACAF for the next World Cup.
Yeah, I also think the format will likely change, and I think it will probably be favorable to Canada if it does. Even if it doesn't, based on what we know right now, I absolutely think Canada should expect to win the 7 to 35 tournament. I don't see a team that's close to them in terms of talent. I know Kurt's going to tell me, it's tough to go to Panama and so on, but in terms
I'm not going to say that today. I'm not going to say that today because it hasn't gotten through. It hasn't gotten through your head. So go.
Do you know who went to Panama and came away with the result, Kurt? The mighty Bermudans. Yeah. So your neighborhood's bigger than Bermuda.
Hey, they're on the rise. They're on the rise, all right?
big Mackie Wells fan.
U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, Ollie, finish your thoughts. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. On paper, I think they should absolutely be able to get through that tournament. Then you're going to need a bit of luck. It's going to depend who you face, who's the fourth team in the Hex, who would be the intercontinental team. That could be difficult if it's South America. But can they possibly make the World Cup? Should they consider themselves in with a chance? Yes, 100%.
Question was, do they have what it takes?
Yeah, Adam Jenkins. Adam Jenkins, I'm going to answer your question because
thank you.
The other guests on our show have not answered the question.
No, we did answer the question.
This is also Simon's question, by the way.
Pretty firm yeses.
Also didn't. Well, I guess I did interrupt Ollie. So that's your one interruption, guys. Wheels, remind me where the U.S. finished in the last qualifiers.
They didn't qualify for the World Cup.
Okay, so why are we even comparing them? We shouldn't even be comparing them right now. Of course, Canada's as good as the U.S. right now. They didn't even qualify for the last World Cup. I'm going to pose one more question to Oliver Platt. So the question was, do they have what it takes? If you were given money right now, let's say, whatever sum of money you want to put down on, will Canada qualify through the second stage or won't they? You would put money on Canada to qualify for the World Cup through that stage.
To qualify for the World Cup, not just out of the
for the World Cup, yeah, for the World Cup.
Through the knockout interconfederation.
Because the answer is no, and you don't need to answer because I can see it on your face. I'll take all the heat on this one, like usual. So had Canada been in the Hex, I would have said decent opportunity to qualify for the World Cup. I might even put money on them to qualify for the World Cup because I think they can beat most of those teams at home. I do not think they can get through that other stage, which is 12 to 16 games, including a playoff with the fourth place finisher in the Hex, and including a playoff that could be against a South American team. So the answer is no, they cannot qualify for the World Cup. And I'm not going to, okay, if things change, I might change my answer. But right now, I do not think they can qualify for the 2022 World Cup.
Like, you're asking me if I'd put money on it. It would depend what the odds were. Like, I'm not saying they're nailed on and I'd put my life savings on it no matter what. But
that was the question. It's like, can they?
The question, what was the question, Adam?
Does Canada have what it takes to qualify for the World Cup? And that comes from Simon.
Totally, 100%.
All right.
Okay. All right. We could go on. This isn't a all generational team part 3.
I want them to qualify. I want them to qualify. It is good for us. It is good for all of Canada. But I'm just giving an answer.
Okay. Let's go now on to the next one. Soccer, indefinite hiatus. Surprise, surprise. So we've been trying to come up with different activities and games, at least one a show, to try and get the creative juices going and staying at their top functioning abilities. Today, we are posing the question to our three analysts. If you are a soccer general manager, what would you consider to be the best and the worst team to be in control of in North America? Who wants to go first? Who has got a strong opinion?
Not me. I forgot about it, so not me.
I can take it.
Oliver, please save the show.
Well, my best answer is fairly boring, but I don't know if you can really argue it in North America right now. It's Atlanta United. They have the owner who is the most willing to spend. They have the biggest fan base by far. And they have established themselves in the global transfer market as a place where young, talented South American players can come to and move on to the next stage, which is Europe. And that is a very good cycle to be in terms of selling one player and attracting the next one, as they've already started to do. So for me, that is an easy choice as the best.
And the worst?
Do you want me to do my worst while that's
I'm trying to buy Kurt as much time because apparently he didn't prep for the show.
I was gonna say Atlanta. I wrote down ATL right here, right as Oliver was saying it. So now I got to redo that one.
Somewhere David Norman Jr. is smiling. That's a callback to yesterday for anyone who missed the show. That's on YouTube. You can watch it. Oliver, the worst job.
My worst. Well, this is a tough one. Like I thought about some of the MLS teams in those old NFL stadiums, which, I don't really like the prospects of. But then you think about, well, what if the Revolution moved to Boston? And what if Chicago get their own stadium in Chicago? Then
that doesn't mean they have bad ownership, though, right? Like New England, no. It's good ownership there. They support the club. If they prop it up.
No, yeah, I'm just talking about who would I want to be GM of.
Oh, okay.
But there is potential there if they can get those stadiums. So I have gone for the Houston Dynamo. I don't see a ton of investment there. I do not see a big fan base there. Even FC Dallas are also struggling for fans. And I think the league is running away from them a little bit.
Houston's an underrated good city.
Decent.
And
big city as well, yeah.
And James Harden has now invested in the team. I think they just need a shot in the arm. That city, but
they also the Rio Grande Valley Toros, who are the hosts of the CONCACAF Women's Qualifying Tournament. Great ground.
You know what, though?
The team isn't very good.
It's nowhere close to Houston, though.
You know what, though? And
believe me, I know that.
Because I go back in MLS maybe a little further than everybody else. There was a time when Houston was at the top of the league in terms of interest and in terms of game day environment at Robertson Stadium when D-Row was there running the show. There was a time when you were like, this is a legit MLS superpower, obviously, when they're winning the title. So it's been a shame to see them kind of fall a little bit.
I think even in recent years, they've been a pretty well-run club in terms of the soccer side. Like they've had success despite their budget. I just wonder how long they can sustain that unless there is, as Gareth said, a real shot in the arm there.
All right. The answer here is easy. The best job right now. And I'm going to stick with Major League Soccer for this theme. Brand new team. You're able to build that team however you like. It's in a brilliant city, a lot of fun. Players want to come there, a great kit, and an incredible owner. Inter Miami. No doubt about that. I would love to work for David Beckham. If you want to hire me today, no problem. I look great in the white and pink unis, pink kit.
The branding is sensational. I'm with you.
Hanging out on South Beach, man. That is for me. Inter Miami right there. And you can build the team from scratch, like I said. And whether it's Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, all these players are like, yeah, one day I want to play for Inter Miami. So the
Wheels taking his talents. Wheels, you're taking your talents
to South Beach. To South Beach. And the team,
the worst.
And the New England Revolution. It's because of that football stadium. Foxborough is in the middle of nowhere. I'm not a New England Patriots Robert Kraft fan either, so that relationship wouldn't work out. Fly Eagles fly. And the New England Revolution is one of those clubs they're the club that needs to move the most right now in all of Major League Soccer, because venue, fan experience, just none of it works.
No.
I actually like going to Foxborough, Wheels. Actually, it's a lovely little trip. You drive down from Boston along the Cape a little bit. So I actually like it down there. But
it was your own social isolation.
Yeah, it was a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be pretty quick. for nostalgia reasons, I'm going with Sporting KC as my job, just because there's a certain piece of me that still misses that club a little bit. I wouldn't call myself a fan anymore, but great stadium, and I love it down there. And it's my hometown team. So a bit of a cop out there. For the worst job right now, I might say RSL, and I think anybody listening to this just needs to do a little Google of the ownership there and some recent stories that have been written, and I'll leave it to you if you're interested.
Fair enough.
View in that
Homework
stadium.
assignment over the weekend.
Dun.
But I'm going to be positive too about Salt Lake, man. Like, the scenery out there is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Oh.
Like,
The stadium, the ground, they got a great NWSL team too out there.
There's that. But yeah, move on.
Move on. Okay. Yes, boss. Next question. This one coming from perhaps my favorite Twitter handle of the bunch, Comrade Pika. And Comrade Pika wants to know, which MLS team was most susceptible to upset a CPL side this season? I think that's the wording of that is wrong.
The way around?
Yeah, I think this was put in the rundown around Kyle. Talking to you.
I think I might actually.
You never call out the producer. Kyle,
here's what it is.
job.
You know what?
Great
I'm retracting. I'm retracting already. It was a typo. Which MLS team was most susceptible to being upset by a CPL side this year?
All right, I'll take
Toronto,
this one.
Vancouver, Montreal. Kurt.
I'll take this one. It's easy. It's the Whitecaps again, just because if you look at the draw, they're in a likely meeting with either Forge or Cavalry, who are the two best CPL teams. And given that they were susceptible last year and did end up losing to a CPL team, you have to go with the Whitecaps once again being susceptible to a loss.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to look at the actual draw, so Kurt is right there, but I'm going to give my answer anyway. I've gone with Montreal, just on the basis that it's the Whitecaps.
Kurt is right, but I'm going with something else.
I'm going to give my case anyway. The reason I said the Impact, even though they had a very good start to the MLS season, is because they've lost Piatti, and I think in a type of game against the CPL side, when you're trying to break down a deep defense, as the Whitecaps was against Cavalry last year, I think Montreal could struggle in that kind of game. So that's why I would go with them.
Yeah, you're right. The Montreal Impact are the most vulnerable to lose. Do you remember what happened against York 9?
That was close.
With all due respect, York 9 should have beat the Montreal Impact at York Lions Stadium. And then the return leg, they were right in it. They were right in that match. And you're right, it was Piatti that went on to win it. The Impact didn't bolster their squad last year. It's tough to repeat. I think that part of their good start to the MLS season had to do is they've been training forever because of the CONCACAF Champions League. 2 competitions there, add in the Canadian Championship. I just don't think that squad's deep enough. And look, after what happened last year, I don't think that Mark DeSantos, who will be on Inside the Game next Thursday night right here on OneSoccer YouTube, joining yours truly, I think that he is very wary of the risk that Canadian Premier League teams possess, and I don't think that he will go down the same route or maybe approach those games in a much different way. I think that it's lessons learned, and I think the Whitecaps will be okay.
It could be, and I actually don't mind that shout wheels, because you would think that the Whitecaps, having known the pain of losing to a club whose payroll is 1/10 of what you are going to come in actually ready and prepared for this series. So I could see you being right in that, but if you're putting some money down on a game, you're going to take the best CPL team to have the best chance to beat what I would consider to be the worst MLS team at this time in Canada. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah. Just over halfway through the show. Keep those questions coming in on YouTube, and they will get sent in. Producer Kyle, I just wanted to see how long it would take for you to come at me for that comment. You know I love it. Next question. And by the way, the answer was about 26 seconds. So it's the experiment worked. Let's move on to, let's take our minds and our analyst hats outside of North America for a bit. Transfer window for European football was not very far off. What is the one transfer you would like to see? I feel like we might get some Jonathan David shouts here, but what is the one transfer you'd like to see happen? Gareth, go with you first.
I'm wearing this today. The greatest club ever in any sport all time. And it's everyone's just waiting. It's a matter of when, not if, Jadon Sancho to Manchester United. It's been a real solid season Ole is running some, has stabilized things at United for the time being. Some really good signings last summer. They're missing that attacking threat down the right-hand side so desperately. Bruno Fernandes can pull the strings inside. Jadon Sancho coming down the right-hand side. 2-3 signings away, including Sancho, and United are right back in the mix in terms of the Premier League. That's the signing that we're all waiting to happen.
How much are you willing to pay for him, Wills?
115. It's not
It's
my
not
money.
his money.
No. The reason I asked that is I would have thought that maybe United fans would be a bit scarred by Pogba and the fact that City have been so successful in kind of the 50 million bracket of signings rather than the 100 million.
Yeah, but they've been signing $50 million fullbacks.
Yeah,
and they bought multiple. They bought multiple goalkeepers. It's the volume of signings that City's able to do that's kind of propelled them and put them in a much better spot. And now they're dealing with financial fair play. I think that the opportunity's there. We'll see what Liverpool looks like coming out of this. So I think there's a real opportunity. My dream signing though, and something that I'd love to see Kylian Mbappe move to Real Madrid. I mean, it's just he is made for that stage. Eden Hazard has been fat and out of shape, and that simply hasn't worked. But Mbappe, there's no question about his quality. And a club like Real Madrid needs to kind of take that next step forward. It's been a up and down year for them. I think that they've had a little bit of instability, and I think Mbappe can get them right back on track.
Ollie?
Yeah, I've gone a little off grid on this one. I'm not going after one of the big kind of fish like Sancho or Mbappe. I would like to see Mesut Ozil leave Arsenal. And the reason for that is
keep him there forever.
It's a bit of a personal preference of mine because I was always a big Ozil fan when he first broke onto the scene with Germany. I thought he was such a good player to watch. And Arsenal, the past few years have essentially torpedoed his career. He's got that big contract and no one wants to take him off their hands. He seems to like living in London, so I don't know if he really wants to leave, but I would love to see Mesut Ozil go to a team that's maybe a little bit outside of the big elite clubs and just have that one final flourish, have a team built around him, and be the player he was at his best, because I think he's great to watch.
DC United links? DC United?
I was thinking maybe a bit higher than DC United. But
okay.
At least they don't have XFL lines on their field anymore.
Kurt, who's your transfer?
I'll take the Jonathan David bait here. I gotta admit, I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit scared for Jonathan David because I saw what happened to Kyle Larin when he left Orlando in haste a little bit and went to a bigger club, and what had to happen a year or two later, right? So my fear for Jonathan David is he goes somewhere where he's going to be a bit part, where he might end up just being loaned out somewhere eventually. So of all the teams chasing him, I think I'd like to see him land more at a mid-major. I think Ajax has been mentioned. And then I have one more.
What about Dortmund?
Yeah, it's tough to call him a mid-major, eh? But the one thing is as long as he is playing, I don't care where he goes. But I don't want to see another, Canadian striker go somewhere and just get lost, right? Kyle Larin was the next big thing in Canadian soccer in terms of strikers, and now he's fourth or fifth on the depth chart, right? And we haven't seen him really, although he has had a little bit of a resurgence. He has had a little bit of a resurgence, I know. I am going to give the CPL a shout out though, and Ollie's guy, Deity Nabsy, maybe the Montreal Impact, maybe something like that, where we can have another positive, feel-good CPL to MLS story, because those are the stories that are going to continue to boost the league that we cover significantly right now.
Staying in Europe, Gareth, we know you are a man of fantastic ideas and outside-the-box thinking. And yes, I'm kissing up to you.
Thank you. Thanks, buddy.
You pitched us a pretty good idea a little while ago, and I'd like you to take center stage, and then we'll get to Kurt and Ollie's thoughts on it.
This is my idea that I pitched. I pitch all kinds of great ideas all the time.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you need me to be more specific?
Yeah, just give me a hint.
Okay, well, it has to do with Europe, because we're there, and the football calendar, and why you think they need to change it and perhaps take on a North American element to it. There we go. Now we're there.
This is genius. So
this is teamwork.
For years, what we've heard, Major League Soccer has dealt with problems dealing with the FIFA calendar, because their season goes from obviously March all the way through till November now, which is not the traditional soccer schedule that the rest of the world kind of abides by. They go by a completely different schedule, obviously, August until May. Why not this be the time where we can flip it so the rest of the world is in line with Major League Soccer, where the footballing calendar actually picks up with the festive season program. So the European season starts on Boxing Day, and you play a bunch of games quickly and you carry on the season and you play through the summer. I don't get this whole idea of not playing in the summer. Europe is hot during the day. At night, it's fine to play at night. We do it here in Major League Soccer in North America where it's very warm. And why not the calendar just end in September, October? Why do we flip the calendar so everything aligns with Major League Soccer in North America? I think that this is the time where we can make that change, because if these European seasons and Champions League and Europa League are going to be extended out now into late summer, early fall, then you kind of hit the pause button. Remember, you have a World Cup coming up that's going to be played in November and December anyways. So over the short term, you'd be having to put those European leagues on pause to deal with the World Cup being played at that time anyways. I think that it just fits, at least over the short term, to try it out with the World Cup, with dealing coming out of this crisis. So maybe Major League Soccer, the way that we do things in North America in terms of our football and calendar, maybe that's the way to go for the time being. Your thoughts, gentlemen?
I want to disagree with Gareth Wheeler. I usually want to disagree with everybody on here, but I cannot disagree with Gareth Wheeler's take. And the one reason is because of what he just said, and that it makes sense in preparation for a World Cup in the Middle East anyway. Which everybody's been concerned about for all kinds of how hot it is and the temperature. So they've changed it to a Winter World Cup. But also, I would take so much joy in hearing all of the Euro snobs in North America who have been complaining about this calendar since the inception of Major League Soccer finally have to eat a bit of crow and realize that MLS is right and everybody else in the world is adapting to come along with us. So I would get great satisfaction in seeing that.
I'm torn. I see the logic behind it for the top leagues, Premier League and La Liga. I could see that. And as you said, the World Cup plays into it. Problem is there's a lot of different levels of soccer in a lot of those European countries, and I do not think they would want to play summer nights in the evening. I think it would destroy their crowds not to have those afternoon games, and it would get very hot in certain countries. So I think at the top level, I can see where you're going there, Wills. For the pyramids in those countries as a whole, I don't know if it would work.
Adapt, evolve. That's like, it just makes football fans across Europe are willing to go out and sit there in frigid temperatures throughout the winter months, but they don't want to go out on a summer evening. It's
more about competition, right? You're going up against so much more if you're playing in the evenings compared to 3 p.m. on a Saturday, which is football in England. It's football's time, right?
It has been time, but again, you can adapt, evolve, and new traditions come in. And what you do in those winter months, that's when you have your international tournaments. That's when you have your Euros or your World Cups during the winter months. So there's still something there. There's still football, but you're consuming in a different way.
Thought about that a little bit, but can you have a World Cup in the United States or Canada in the winter? I don't know.
You can in Mexico.
Yeah.
Can in LA.
You can have it in the
Texas.
fall. We've had, we're sitting here today. We've had MLS Cup finals in the first few weeks of December, and you've had CONCACAF Champions League games being played at the beginning of February. So you can do it. I think that ideally it's in the fall. The fall, in November and early December, generally things are playable, at least in the more southern parts of this country. But the question is, when would a World Cup be coming back after 2026 anyways? So might be a moot point.
Valid question. Okay, next one from the fans. This one comes from Matt Mahoney. How can the development path in Canada be improved to ensure that more players reach a higher level, men and women? Ollie, first stab?
I think this one is pretty simple for me. Like in terms of the men's side, at least, we have a big advantage in this country now, which is that we have a league that's been created to bridge the gap in some cases between the 16-year-olds who come out of youth programs and, you know, getting to that higher level, whether it be Europe, whether it be elsewhere in North America. We have the clubs, the professional clubs that can now bridge that gap. That's a big problem in a lot of countries around the world. So for me, the answer at this point is fairly simple. We need more youth clubs. We need better access to those youth clubs in terms of the fees that are being paid, and we need better coaching within those clubs.
Gareth, are you shaking your head because you disagree,
Yeah,
or
we need less youth clubs? And being a player who's come through this system, the biggest problem in Canadian soccer for as long as there's been the game being played in this country is every club, every region has a different way of going about things. It's been a massive issue in this country, whether it's because of finances, geography, whatever, getting club football across the board in this country on the same page. The infighting needs to stop. This is Jason DeVos. This is like his agenda. He's flying all across this country, bringing youth soccer from the beginning levels of this country together to try to get everyone on the same page. There's too many people in this country for too long who have been in it for themselves and think that they know better than the rest. The curriculum, the program must be followed. Everyone needs to be on the same page. You know, less is more, in my opinion. So.
Okay, I read that the wrong way. I thought Wheels was saying we need to get rid of youth clubs. That's not what you're saying, right?
No. There's too many youth clubs.
Wow.
There's too many people with individual agendas because trying to do it their way, because one, it makes a profit for them in their club, and they think that they know better than other people that have been in the game for longer.
So why would they think that? Why would they think that?
You know, football people.
Everyone has an ego.
Everyone thinks that they can do it better than the next, and this is the livelihood of a lot of people in this country. And I think in other sports like hockey, there's a well-established pyramid where you kind of know where you fit in. That pyramid in Canadian soccer, it's always shifted and changed. Yeah. There hasn't been a proper pyramid. That's why the Canadian Premier League is a very important part of that, and just making sure that you can establish the proper pecking order and the proper system. That's entirely important, but you don't want rogue people and rogue clubs coming in and throwing things off.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think there does need to be, you know, unity in terms of the vision of what Canadian soccer is going to be. At the same time, I would say that I also don't mind diversity in terms of some teams are going to coach in different ways, or at least encourage a different style of play. I think we have so many different types of players from different backgrounds. When you look at Lucas Cavallini and Jonathan Osorio going to South America, for example, and that's produced one type of player. Then you look at Alphonso Davies coming from a completely different background, and that's produced a different type of player. I think that should be a strength of the national team. That kind of, you know, the differing styles that you can integrate into one team. But I take Gareth's point that for sure there has been a lot of kind of people pulling in different directions in unhelpful ways.
Yeah, I like what Alexi Lawless says on this topic in terms of American development, and that we need to find our own way, and that there are a number of different paths that, at least for the time being, still include college. As we saw with someone like Joel Waterman, that system can't produce good players. But going back to what Wheels said, in terms of the cooperation, I think a lot of times we get into our silos here where, you know, one of the questions we're asked all the time is, you know, when will CPL teams have academy teams? When will they have, you know, that top to bottom academy, and kind of similar to FC Edmonton? And they all think that that's the big solution right now, is we all need all the clubs to have academies. And that's not the solution, right? We know that could be part of the solution, but we're not going to develop players if, you know, just because every CPL team has a U13 program going, right? What I envision, and I believe we're heading down this path, is for the CPL to be in partnership with D3 leagues across the country. Right now, we know that exists with League One. There are things happening in BC. Maybe we'll see one in the Maritimes. There's talks between the CPL and PLSQ ongoing all the time. And for those leagues to be in cooperation with the CPL, so there's a bigger net. And much as the CPL did at the start of last year, where a ton of League One players just moved into the CPL, I think that needs to exist across the country, where everything is connected. All these little clubs that are in these D3 competitions are working together to develop players for Canada's Tier 1 league.
Well, a lot of them, like for example, Major League Soccer teams, they've had territorial rights throughout the country for quite some time, but there are areas of the country where there isn't territorial rights. So it's weird. You go to London, Ontario, and the Vancouver Whitecaps have an affiliate club in London, Ontario, because that's outside of Toronto FC's territory, where they are trying to impose their coaching style, their philosophies within clubs peppered across this country. It's an intricate balance, but I think that each club, that's fine. You can impart your own style of play, your own nuances and the way that you want to see your players develop. But for me, it starts even before that. At an even earlier level, how are we going to develop players in this country, and how do we get the best out of the resources that we have?
All right, we got to move on, but that's a lot of good opinion for you on your question there, Matt. So hope you enjoyed and hope you're able to take something out of that. Speaking of Alexi Lawless, another guest that Wheels you had on Inside the Game Tuesdays and Thursdays last night was Stephen Beitashour, and he was reluctant to pick who was a better MLS player, Sebastian Giovinco or David Villa.
He knows the answer.
Debate here. We're not afraid to debate here, so I want to open that up. We got to get to our bracket, so this won't be. We have about 6 or 7 minutes for this, so let it all out. Let it all out the debate. But we are going to pick between the three.
Can we let Kurt go first?
Yeah, if it's not a good debate, Kurt should tell us why.
Nobody here. Okay. The answer is Giovinco is the all-time greatest player in Major League Soccer history. And we're not doing this whole argument where we talk about, well, what about Thierry Henry? He played here, and we talking about in their prime, or just we're talking about their performance in Major League Soccer during the time they were here. And Giovinco had the greatest season for me in MLS history. 2015, 22 goals, 16 assists. And beyond the numbers, he was a part of so many big nights for TFC, over a 2 or 3 year period. You remember the playoff win at New York City FC, where he took the team on his back. You remember the free kick at Tigres. I was there. You remember the getting off a plane in 2015 and coming on and scoring the goal that sealed TFC's place in its first ever playoff berth. So for me, Giovinco is the greatest MLS player of all time. I don't think Stephen Beitashour knows that.
Yeah, it's Giovinco for me. But that being said, what's the question? David Villa or Carlos Vela we're talking about here?
Carlos
Vela.
Because he played with both.
Okay. Yeah, because he's playing with Vela right now. So what I would say is that Carlos Vela has the opportunity to do what Giovinco has done and maybe more at LAFC. They're a new club that's still maybe in kind of that earlier stage of challenging for MLS Cups. And I think the potential is there for him to be the best player on one of the best teams in league history, like Giovinco was. Yeah. But as of right now, Giovinco has done it, so he's the answer.
It's because Giovinco's won.
Yeah.
But statistically speaking, you can make an argument that it's Vela, no problem. He has 50 goals and 20 assists in 61 MLS games. Think about that. 50 goals and 20 assists in 61 games. Giovinco, this is just statistically speaking, he for Toronto FC in Major League Soccer, played in not Canadian Championship, not Champions League, 68 goals in 114 games. Vela's almost there. Like, that's how good of a goal scorer he is. And if you're going to go beyond that conversation, honestly, if I could take either one of those guys, I would go for a third option. I would want to go with Zlatan Ibrahimovic from what he's done the last 2 years. His production also completely off the charts for the Galaxy. 53 goals in 58 games, and he was a man-mountain, and no one could mark Zlatan out of a game. And he had a much inferior team around him than Giovinco or Vela and the sides that they've had complementing them. So I would go with the third option, Ibrahimovic. But
if I was building my MLS team and I could take any player to kind of extend from Gareth's answer there, I'd take Almiron.
Would you? Over both? Wow.
Yeah, Larson, I wrote down Villa, not Vela. Would that change your answer if I asked the question properly?
No, and I'm. These guys have made a lot of good points. I remember a prominent Toronto columnist, sports columnist, who is loosely follows the game, wrote a column at the time of Giovinco's signing, which he called into question the player for coming over, said that he would be a bust. We were overpaying him. Toronto was overpaying him. He'd be gone within a year. And so I think when you add everything up, for him to come in and perform at that level and earn his pay and fill that stadium and win championships and perform on the biggest nights in MLS over the period of time he did, can Vela catch him? Yeah, probably, but he's got to win. But for me, and Giovinco just coming in, opening the newspaper that day, reading that column, and then saying, wait and see, that's big for me.
Yeah, agreed.
Debate over. Okay, so we've got through all of our main topics. We didn't even know if we were going to go a full hour today, but we're already at 55 minutes. So before we go, we have to mention the OneSoccer Bracket Challenge. And Kurt, I'm sorry. You made it close. It was closer than some perhaps might have thought.
What was the score?
I don't know that we ever got final numbers. I think it was around 70 or 65, 35 towards him, but that was Twitter.
Yeah.
We didn't get Instagram numbers. So.
On Twitter, it was like 70-30, which, to be fair to you, Kurt, was better than I thought it would be for you. That's not...
Yeah,
maybe you mended some bridges with Impact fans, so maybe that's a more important takeaway for you, Kurt.
I don't know. I had a few. I was in the middle of the night. I woke up in sweats and in a sweat and checked my phone, and I saw a bunch of Impact fans were basically laughing at me for the lopsided loss, and I think a lot of them just decided not to vote for anybody and abstain and just have a laugh at it instead.
Feels any regrets on your campaign, or do you think you ran the best campaign?
I had no campaign. I was actually supporting the other candidates because, like Kurt Larson, I watched the Hangout when you were speaking. I know that our friends over at TSN, when they did their top 10 Canadian men's national team players, had Maxime Crepeau as number 10 and no Milan Borjan. I was like, this is insane. Borjan's Canada's number one goalkeeper, all-time clean sheets leader. He was just playing in the Champions League just this past fall. I'm like, are you mad? I'm going up against that guy. It's obviously Milan Borjan, so I have no problem campaigning for my opponent.
Well, the two of you ran valiant efforts, and you still got further than Ollie and I did, so you can feel comfortable knowing that.
Well,
I'm unbeaten. So
that's true, Ollie. We are unbeaten.
You guys were on the bubble. You guys were on the bubble. You guys were on the last four out or first four out.
We're on the NIT bracket, and I'm okay with that. Okay.
Big picture observation here. 14 of the 16 remaining in the tournament are players. I think that shows you what the public thinks of us pundits. Yeah, shout out to the biggest upset though.
There were a couple good upsets. So I'm going to run through the round of 16. Voting gets underway on Monday. So going around the horn, starts with Alphonso Davies and Jordan Huitema, Janine Becky, and our friend Arcadia Marcuzzi, who is representing the pundits pretty well, I'd say. Tristan Borges will take on Diana Matheson, Milan Borjan, and Jonathan David. On the other side of the bracket, Christine Sinclair, who I think has got to be the favorite to run away with this, and Scott Arfield. Atiba Hutchison taking on Stephanie LeBay, John Herdman, and Jonathan Osorio. Kurt, I think I know who you might be voting for out of Vengeance. And then Kadisha Buchanan and Lucas Cavallini. And again, the voting gets underway on Monday. You can vote on Twitter at OneSoccer. We're close to 8,000 followers, so our digital and social coordinator Armin wanted us to plug that, and Instagram as well on the stories. Any final words on the bracket or anything before we go?
The next round,
it could be upsets or matchups.
I was just putting down. I think Atiba versus Christine Sinclair. That'll be a good one.
I'm looking at Becky Marcuzzi. Like, you would think that Janine Becky is taking that one, but you just don't know with Arcadio. He's got momentum behind him and could be a bit of a Cinderella story here.
And when I said that, I was assuming that Sinclair would beat Arfield and Atiba would beat whoever he takes, because he is a legend.
Yeah, I should have found a way to cheat.
You're all the Kurt Larson burner accounts.
Yeah, I should have.
Do their job.
To be honest,
integrity is just too much for that.
Yeah, last comments from me here. I was actually surprised that James Sharman and our colleague Andy Petrillo did not fare better. So.
Yeah. I mean, all it takes is for one retweet to get to the people who may not be as familiar with James or Andy, and then the players take over. But it was a good first round. I'm sure it is. And
it's hurting them.
we'll keep our thoughts with them this weekend. That's going to wrap it up for us this week on the Hangout. I want to thank all of our guests for coming on all of the shows, not just the Hangout here. Of course, Asa as well. Gareth, you got a couple good shows lined up next week. But before we say goodbye, I want to make one quick note and a shout out to all of the OneSoccer producers and editors and staff and social media coordinators and management that you don't get to see on these Hangouts all the time. They're still working every single day like we are. So to them, I say cheers. Thank you as we all try and get through this quarantine together. Enjoy your weekend.
Shotgun it.
Oh God, this is a family-rated program, Wheeler. That's where we'll leave you. We'll talk to you on Monday. Have an awesome weekend, everybody.
See you later.